about fantasy football as well. Mike, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, good to be here, guys. How's it going?
Yeah, very good. I just, well, not just, but I've looked at your projections of the Jacksonville Jaguars. The numbers don't look good, man.
Yeah, maybe this wasn't the best time to call, guys.
Hey, Mike, hasn't been a good time in like a dozen years.
Yeah. Look, I tried to put as positive a spin as I could on my coverage of this team as of late. I mean, there are some potential future stars, right? You trade away Yannick, but you have Josh Allen and Chase on at edge. You know, maybe that's two recent first-round picks that could end up being stars on at edge rusher there, and at least we'll get a look at this young running back group now without Leonard Fournette there. Maybe Devine Ozigbo or Armstead turn into stars. Who knows? Maybe James Robinson does as well. And by the way, as rookie quarterback seasons go, Gardner Minshew was pretty good last season, right? Barely turned it over, led the NFL in scrambles, added a lot of value with his legs behind a shaky O-line. So maybe they hit something there, right? We're not going to know until we get a longer look at him this season. This is usually the year two that quarterbacks make their biggest leap. So who knows? Maybe they found a gem. But I'll tell you what, guys, right now, overall, this roster very shaky. It's fallen quite a bit defensively from where it was a few years ago when they were one of the best units in the NFL. And I think it's going to be a rough rebuilding year. But again, they have some pieces here, and I think they'll get it straightened out at some point.
See, Brent, he just gave you 10 reasons why you should be excited this year.
Well, hey, I am.
I can only give you about 2 of them.
I'm the owner of the Sunshine and Rainbows Club here in Jacksonville, Mike, just so you know. And I'm a little higher on Minshew than most of the national prognosticators are. So we're putting a lot of eggs in that basket. But you do have listed as the Jaguars' 2 top positions are receivers and the pass rushers. And we've talked highly about them. I mean, they're fun to watch, the receivers. We'll see what happens. And obviously, Chason and Allen are really good. I've got just one quick question about how you do this. I mean, are you locked in like a room or something for a long time? Where do you come up with these numbers? How long does this stuff take? I hope you have a team that helps you out and a mighty big calculator.
No, I mean, ESPN Stats and Information does a great job feeding me the data after every game, which it helps the process immensely. But no, I mean, I built my projection model about a year ago, and I update it every day. I was just actually working on the most recent batch of NFL transactions. Guys, it's the offensive categories, of course, for fantasy football, but I do full defensive projections. I do kickers. I do punters, returners, head coaches you could use. If you're maybe you're a really advanced fantasy player, maybe you're a really advanced fantasy player and you want to step it up, add punters and head coaches and ramp it up over at ESPN.com. We have all kinds of options. But, it's a long process, and I like to think it's a pretty well-oiled machine, so it doesn't take me as much time as you might think in season, but it is still, nonetheless, a lot of work.
Mike, man, whatever they're paying you should ask for double. That's ridiculous. You're doing coaches, punters as well. That's very cool. Listen.
Hey, maybe he does MMA fighters.
Maybe he does MMA fighters as well, man. We'll pick his brain about that a little later. Listen, I can sit here and talk Jacksonville Jaguars if I want to, but you know what, man? You're a fantasy expert. When I'm talking to a fantasy expert, I don't care about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I care about winning my fantasy football championships. What's really at stake here? So when we talk about fantasy football, we talk about the quarterback position obviously being very important. To me right now, you got 2 guys. You got Patrick Mahomes and you got Lamar Jackson as your 1 and 2, right? You can slot them out either Mahomes number 1, Jackson number 1, but they're 1 and 2. My question to you is, there's a couple other guys on my radar. I don't want to say who they are because Brent's listening. We haven't even drafted yet. But the names rhyme with Mosh Fallon and maybe Lyler Fury, let's just say. So, when we were talking about Mahomes and Jackson here, where is a suitable place to draft those guys? And when you do draft them, are they going to be so ahead of everybody else where it's like, you better get those guys if you want to have a chance to win the championship this season?
Yeah, I mean, if you look across a 10-team leagues right now, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are going right around the round 2, round 3 turn, right? So you're talking right around 20th in that range. Everyone else is going about 5 rounds later or later than that in the double-digit round. So, if you want to kind of get an edge, maybe you're still new to fantasy football and, it's not a super competitive league and you want to get some sort of edge, just wait a quarterback, right? Let people start reaching on them, thinking that it is a super important position and take advantage of the depth that's available later in your draft. It's going to be a winning strategy, and it's one of the number ones you should be thinking about if you're new to the game. But that really goes for if you're advanced as well. I mean, you're going to be able to look at a guy like Kyler Murray and say, maybe he is the next Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. I mean, he was the first overall pick last season. The pedigree's there. He was QB8 in fantasy as a rookie because he had tremendous rushing ability. His head coach / play caller is entering his second season in the NFL. And he got some guy named DeAndre Hopkins as his new top wide receiver. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good situation as well. So I do think that Murray, you could get him around round 7 or 8 right now. It's worth the plunge, even though you can get a good discount at quarterback. It's worth it in the middle rounds because he could be a league winner this season.
Hey, Brent, are you listening? Kyler Murray, worth the plunge.
I tried to block that out.
You hearing this right now?
I tried to block
Kyler
that
Murray. Brent Martineau's a Kyler Murray denier. Don't worry about Brent Martineau right now. We're talking to me. All right, so listen, let's put a little Jaguars twist on it real quick then. Leonard Fournette right now, we're to the point where some people haven't drafted yet. And obviously, I don't know where you have him ranked right now that he got let go by the Jaguars. You'd have to assume that wherever he goes, it's going to suit his style. And when you talk about his style, you're talking about a guy who obviously commands attention around the goal line, gets those touchdowns, but also keep in mind was a leading receiver last year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there is some, I think, use for him in half-point PPR or full-point PPR. I guess my question to you is, where do you see Fournette going right now in mock drafts, and where should people try to take him?
Yeah, he should be going in the double-digit rounds, probably early double-digit rounds.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Look when we're done here, look across the NFL rosters, just look at depth charts, and find me a running back room where he's going to go and be the starter. I mean, it doesn't exist right now. You know, running back is as deep as ever. Teams are using committees. They're pretty happy. There's just that situation does not exist. So his best case scenario is probably somewhere like Kansas City, where he go in. They have some guys there. They obviously have the rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He'll be the 1, and he steps in as the 2 and kind of mixes in. Maybe he takes advantage of that pass-heavy, super effective offense, and it makes his efficiency and his numbers look good, a lot like it did for Damian Williams, among others, in recent seasons, and kind of fills that void for that team. And, maybe if there's an injury or Edwards-Helaire struggles, suddenly he's looking at 20 touches a game in the best offense in the NFL. So, that's a probably best-case scenario outcome. Another situation maybe could be Chicago, but they don't seem very interested if David Montgomery misses time. But again, he's just very, very unlikely to find his starting job. So why would you take him in round 6 or 7? I mean, he's a backup, and he doesn't even have a team right now. So for me, I'm not too interested in him at this point.
Talking to fantasy football expert and analytics guru Mike Clay here. Mike, I got one last question for you. I'll let Brent get back to it. How much do you pay attention to storylines when you're trying to construct your fantasy football roster? The reason I bring it up is this. David Johnson, a guy who had some pretty good Arizona, gets traded to Houston. Now, we always say no player on the field has more tied head coach's success than the quarterback position, and I agree. But I truly think if Bill O'Brien wants to keep his job this year, he needs David Johnson to have a monumental season to prove that, you know what, we traded DeAndre Hopkins away, but it was justified because of how well David Johnson did. So to me, David Johnson's a super sleeper. Do you agree with me, or should I not be looking so much in those kind of storylines?
No, I totally hear what you're coming from, but I'm more prone to look at the depth chart and say, okay, well, you have David Johnson. You have Duke Johnson, who they don't like to carry the football. We've seen that throughout his career, including last season in Houston. And then you have Buddy Howell and Scotty Phillips and Karen Higdon. I mean, those guys aren't going to play. It's going to be the David Johnson show, and it's going to be Duke Johnson mixed in passing situations. So there's just not really any competition. I still think this is an above-average offense. Hopkins is gone, but they do have a pretty decent group, 4 deep at wide receiver. The O-line's still a problem, of course, but they just don't really have the bodies in the backfield for you to say, okay, well, I think this guy's going to get 10 carries a game. I mean, they just don't have that. So from that standpoint, I do think David Johnson is a fine pick in the 5th round of drafts if you need a running back there. That being said, I'm usually attacking running back early in the 1st round or 2, and then I'm going heavy on wide receivers in that range where guys like Todd Gurley and David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell and Melvin Gordon are being drafted. I'm not too fond of those guys. I want those young, early round guys that catch a lot of footballs, and then I'll pivot to wide receivers. But again, if you want to take that stab in round 5 on a guy like Johnson, knowing he has a high floor because of the volume, I really can't crush it for that.
ESPN's Mike Clay with us on Action Sports Jax on ESPN 690. We got to let him run, but I do have a question for you, man. Do you walk into a bathroom and people ask you fantasy questions? Are you in the line at the grocery store and people are like, "Hey, where should I take so-and-so?"
I would.
Yeah. Once in a while. I mean, when I was on vacation, I actually was wearing my mask, of course, and someone recognized me and was asking me questions. So I was surprised by that. I thought the mask would cover it up a little bit. But look, honestly, I don't mind. I love it. I love talking football. It's my life. Like I said, I'm updating projections year round for punters. I mean, in the middle of after this. So So it's just a constant process. I enjoy it, and whatever it takes to make people, help people enjoy the game, play the game over at ESPN Fantasy, have a good time, and help make roster decisions, because I'm doing their projections. They're not random. I'm trying my best to put the best guys at the top so you guys can get the right guys in your lineup. It's not perfect by any means. It's a high variance game, as you guys know, but I enjoy the process, and hopefully it helps people win some championships this year.
If you're projecting Doug Marrone, he does win a lot of challenges, so he's got a good challenge record.
Now we're
there
talking.
You go.
Now
Add
we're
that to
talking.
the statistics. Mike Clay from ESPN, we appreciate it, man. Fantasy football, so much fun to play with your buddies, your family, and stay connected during this pandemic. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy man.
Anytime, fellas.